Neri stood in front of the mirror and looked at her wrist one more time. The small blue mark was there, as always, dull and lifeless. Just a faint pattern on her purple skin that meant nothing to her anymore. 26 stellar cycles old, and still no glow. Most Tylines found their soulmates by the time they were 20. Neri had given up hope. It's just biology, she told herself, fixing her science uniform. And I have more important things to do. Today was a big day at the Galactic Unity Science Station. After 5 years of talks, humans from Earth were finally joining the interstellar community. As the diplomatic science liaison, Neri had to greet them. She walked down the curved hallway of the station, her steps quick and light in the artificial gravity. Other aliens nodded to her as she passed. The station housed 27 different species, all working together to share knowledge. Nervous about meeting the humans? Asked Mito, her Tyline friend who worked in communications. A little, Neri admitted. We've only seen pictures and videos. Their planet is so far away. I heard they're emotional and unpredictable, Mito said, but very creative. Their art and music are already popular in some sectors. Neri nodded. Their technology developed differently than ours. They might help us solve problems we can't. The station's announcement system chimed softly. Attention all staff. Earth vessel Unity has docked. Welcome ceremony begins in 20 minutes. That's my cue, Neri said, straightening her uniform again. Wish me luck. You don't need luck, Mito smiled. Just don't let them shake your hand. I heard they touch each other as a greeting. Very strange. Neri laughed. Don't worry, I studied their customs. I can handle a simple handshake. The docking bay was filled with officials and scientists from across the station. Director Tay, the senior Xylene representative, stood at the front. Remember, he told Neri, this is a historic moment. Humans are the first species we've encountered who developed faster than light travel independently from the galactic archives. Yes, Director, Neri said. Their achievement is remarkable. The large metal doors slid open. 7 humans walked through, looking around with wide eyes. Their skin tones ranged from light beige to deep brown. They wore blue uniforms with a patch showing Earth, a blue and green sphere. Director Ta stepped forward. Welcome to Galactic Unity Science Station. I am Director Tai of Tylene. A tall human with short black hair stepped forward. Thank you for your welcome. I am Commander Hyun of Earth. We are honored to join the galactic community. His voice was deeper than Neri expected. The translation device worked perfectly, but she could hear his original words underneath. The sound was pleasant to her ears. Director Ta gestured to Neri. This is Chief Science Liaison Neri. She will be your guide during your stay. Neri stepped forward, trying to hide her nervousness. The human called Hyun was looking at her with curious dark eyes. Humans had no antennae like Xylenes, just flat faces with features that changed to show emotions. Right now, his lips were curved upward in what she recognized as a smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, Hyun said, extending his hand toward her. Neri remembered her training. Humans shook hands as greeting. It was just a simple touch, palm to palm, and a gentle up and down motion. The pleasure is mine, she said, reaching out. Their hands met. Hyun's 5 fingers wrapped gently around her 4-fingered hand. And then it happened. The mark on Neri's wrist erupted with light. Bright blue-green waves pulsed from her wrist, illuminating the entire docking bay. The light was so intense that several officials stepped back, shielding their eyes. Neri froze. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. And especially not with a human. Every Tylene knew about the Soulmate indicator. It was part of their biology. A special mark that glowed when they touched their perfect genetic match. It guided Xylenes to compatible partners who would produce the healthiest offspring. But a human, it was impossible. Humans came from a planet 40,000 light-years away. They had different DNA, different biology, different everything. Yet the proof was shining from her wrist, pulsing in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. Nari's jaw dropped. A physical reaction Hylene's rarely showed. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She just stared at the glowing light between them. Hyun looked confused but didn't pull his hand away. Is this normal?" he asked, his voice soft with wonder. Director Ta stepped forward quickly. No, it is not." His voice was sharp with shock. "This is unprecedented." The other humans were murmuring among themselves. The other aliens in the room were backing away, some pointing, others taking pictures with their devices. Nari finally found her voice. I'm sorry. This is unexpected." She gently pulled her hand away, but the glow didn't fade. Her mark continued to pulse with light. "Perhaps we should continue this welcome in a more private setting," Director Ta said, his professional tone returning even as his antenna twitched with agitation. "Nari, please take Commander Hyun and his team to the conference room." Nari nodded, still unable to look away from her glowing wrist. "Yes, Director. Please follow me," she said to the humans, trying to sound normal. As they walked through the station hallways, other aliens stopped to stare at the glowing light that followed Nari. She had never felt so exposed in her life. Inside the large conference room, Director Tai asked the other humans to wait while he spoke with Nari and Commander Hyun privately in his office. "This is impossible," Director Ta said once the door closed behind them. "The Soulmate indicator only works with other Xylenes. It's a biological impossibility for it to react to another species." "Yet it happened," Nari said, looking at her wrist. The glow had dimmed slightly but was still clearly visible. Hyun looked between them. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. What exactly is happening here?" Nari took a deep breath. "Every Xylene is born with a biological marker on their wrist. It's dormant until we touch our perfect genetic match. Then it glows. It helps us find compatible partners. Like a built-in dating app," Hyun said, then smiled at their confused looks. "Sorry. Human joke. So this glow means we're compatible." "It should be impossible," Director Tae repeated. "Our species evolved on planets thousands of light years apart." "Yet it happened," Nari said again, more firmly this time. Director Tae's antenna twitched in thought. "This will cause a sensation back home. The Science Council will want to study this phenomenon immediately." "Study?" Hyun asked. "Yes. If your touch triggered Nari's indicator, there must be something in your genetic makeup or bioelectric field that matches Xylene biology. This could be the most important cross-species discovery in centuries." Nari felt her stomach tighten. "Director, I'm not sure I want to be a research subject. I understand your discomfort, but think of the scientific implications," Director Ta said. "This goes beyond just you two. It could change how we understand interspecies biology." Hyun cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take some time before making decisions. This is my first day in space station, after all." Director Tae's antenna straightened, a sign of realization. "Of course. How inconsiderate of me. You've traveled far and need rest. We can discuss this tomorrow." He turned to Nari. "Show Commander Hyun to the human quarters, and perhaps wear gloves until we understand this situation better." After Director Tae left, Nari and Hyun stood in awkward silence. "I'm sorry about this," Nari finally said. "This isn't how first contact is supposed to go." Hyun smiled. It was a nice smile, warm and genuine. "No need to apologize. On Earth, we have a saying. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans." Nari found herself smiling back. "That's a good saying." As they walked to the human quarters, Nari kept glancing at her wrist. The mark was still glowing softly. "So," Han said casually, "does this mean we're engaged now?" Nari looked up in shock, then saw the humor in his eyes. Another human joke. "Yes," he laughed. "But seriously, what does this mean for you? Is it a big deal in your culture?" Nari thought carefully before answering. "Yes. Finding your soulmate is important for Xylenes, but finding one in another species, that's never happened before. I don't know what it means. They reached the door to the human quarters. Hyun turned to face her. Well, whatever it means, he said, I look forward to finding out. After all, we're going to be working together for the next year. Nari nodded, suddenly aware of how tall he was, how different from any Thailand man. Yet something about him felt familiar already. Until tomorrow, then, she said. As she walked back to her own quarters, Nari couldn't stop looking at her glowing wrist. All her life, she had waited for this sign. She had almost given up hope. Now it had finally happened, with someone from another world, another species, another evolutionary path entirely. Science couldn't explain it. But as the soft light pulsed with her heartbeat, Nari realized she wanted to understand why. Not just for science, but for herself. Tomorrow would bring tests and questions and probably trouble. But tonight, she had found something she thought was impossible. Hope glowed on her wrist, right against the darkness of space. Word spread fast on the space station. By morning, everyone knew about the Xylene scientist whose soulmate mark glowed for a human. As Nari walked through the halls to the medical bay, aliens stopped to stare at her. Just ignore them, Mito said, walking beside her friend. They're just curious. I feel like a lab specimen, Nari said. She wore thin gloves now, covering her still glowing wrist mark. The light was visible even through the fabric. Well, technically you are going to be a lab specimen today, Mito said with a small smile. The doctors want to run tests, right? Nari nodded. Director Ta is called in our top biologists. They're going to examine both me and Commander Hyun. Speaking of the human, Mito pointed ahead. Commander Hyun was waiting outside the medical bay. He looked different today, wearing casual earth clothes instead of his uniform. His dark hair was slightly messy, like he hadn't had time to fix it. When he saw Nari, he smiled and waved. Good morning, he said, ready for our exciting day as test subjects. Nari found herself smiling back. As ready as I'll ever be. I'll leave you two alone, Mito said, her antenna twitching with interest. Good luck with the tests. After Mito left, Hyun looked at Nari's gloved hands. Still glowing. Yes, it hasn't stopped since yesterday. Nari slowly removed one glove to show him. The blue-green light pulsed gently. It's beautiful, Hyun said, like a tiny ocean wave. Before Nari could reply, the medical bay doors opened. Director Ta stood there with 3 other Xylenes in white medical coats. Ah, good. You're both here, Director Ta said. Let's begin. The tests took hours. The doctors took blood samples from both of them. They measured the energy field around Nari's mark. They scanned Hyun's body with different machines. They asked endless questions about their health histories. During a short break, Nari and Hyun sat in a small waiting room, drinking water. Is it always like this when Xylenes find their soulmates? Hyun asked. No, Nari laughed. Usually people just celebrate. Maybe the couple's families meet for dinner. No blood tests or energy scans. That sounds nicer than this, Hyun said. On Earth, people date for a while before deciding if they're right for each other. Some use apps or matchmakers, but mostly people just meet and see if they like each other. That sounds so random, Nari said. How do you know if you're genetically compatible? Hyun shrugged. We don't. We go by feelings. Love, attraction, shared interests. Love. Nari repeated the word carefully. Your translation device uses that word a lot in your Earth stories, but I'm not sure I understand it. Hyun thought for a moment. It's hard to explain. It's a feeling of deep connection, wanting to be with someone, caring about their happiness, choosing them every day. Choosing. This was a new idea for Nari. Xylenes don't really choose. When the mark glows, that's it. That's your match. And everyone accepts that. No questions asked. It's biology, Nari said simply. Why question it? Hyun smiled. Humans question everything. It's our nature. Before they could talk more, a doctor called them back for more tests. By late afternoon, the doctors finally finished. Nari and Hyun sat in Director Tae's office as the lead doctor, Dr. Ju, presented their findings. It's remarkable, Dr. Ju said, showing charts on a large screen. Commander Hyun's bioelectric field resonates at exactly the same frequency as Nari's. But how is that possible? Director Tae asked. Humans and Xylenes evolved on different planets. We don't know yet, Dr. Ju admitted, but the evidence is clear. By every measure we use to confirm Xylene soulmate pairs, they match perfectly. Neri felt a strange mix of feelings. Part of her was relieved. The mark wasn't malfunctioning. But another part felt more confused than ever. What happens now? Hyun asked. Director Ta looked serious. I sent the preliminary findings to the Tylene Science Council. They're very interested in this case. You mean they don't believe it? Neri said. They find it hard to accept, Director Ta corrected. This challenges everything we know about our biology. Some council members want you both to return to Xylene for more detailed study. Return to Xylene? Nari sat up straight. But my work is here. The human delegation just arrived. I can't leave. And I can't go to Xylene. Hyun added. My mission is to establish Earth's presence here at the station. Director Ta held up his hands. I understand. I've told them the same. For now, they've agreed to send specialists here instead. But, he paused. But what? Nari asked. There are some conservative elements on the council who are disturbed by this development. They believe the soulmate mark is sacred to Xylene biology. The idea of it activating for another species troubles them. You mean they think it's wrong? Hyun asked. Some do, yes, Director Ta said carefully. They're questioning whether the mark is malfunctioning or whether there's been some kind of contamination. Nari felt a chill. She knew about these conservative groups. They believed in keeping Xylene bloodlines pure. They didn't even like Xylenes from different regions marrying each other. What do you think, Director? She asked. Director Tae's antenna moved in a pattern that showed he was thinking carefully. I think science requires us to follow evidence, not beliefs, and the evidence says your mark is working correctly. What that means, I don't know yet, but I won't ignore facts because they're inconvenient. Nari felt grateful for his support. Until the specialists arrive, I suggest you both continue your normal duties. Director Ta continued. Nari, you're still responsible for the human delegation. Commander Hyun, your team has a full schedule of orientation meetings. Just, perhaps avoid physical contact for now, to prevent further complications. Later that evening, Nari showed Hyun and 2 other humans around the science labs. She wore her gloves, and they all kept a careful distance from each other. As the tour ended, the other humans went ahead while Hyun hung back with Nari. Are you okay? He asked. You seem worried. Nari hesitated, then decided to be honest. I am worried. On my world, going against traditional beliefs can be difficult. If the conservative council members decide this mark is wrong somehow, what could they do? They could order me back to Xylene for correction. They might say my mark is defective and try to fix it. Can they do that? Hyun looked concerned. They have influence, Nari said. And this situation is unprecedented. There are no rules for it. They walked in silence for a moment. On Earth, Hyun finally said, we have a long history of people saying who others can or cannot love. It never ends well. People's hearts don't follow rules. But this isn't about love, Nari said quickly. It's biology. Is it? Hyun stopped walking and turned to face her. You told me the mark shows who is compatible. But compatible for what? Just having healthy children. Or something more. Nari had never thought about it that way. Xylenes always assumed the mark was about reproduction. But was that all? I don't know, she admitted. No one ever questions it. Maybe it's time someone did, Han said gently. Before Nari could reply, her communication device buzzed. It was a message from Mido. Emergency. Come to your lab right away. I have to go, Nari said. Something's wrong in my lab. I'll come with you, Han offered. They hurried through the station corridors to Nari's research lab. When they arrived, Mido was waiting outside, looking upset. Someone broke in, she said. They took your research samples and damaged your equipment. Nari rushed inside. Her lab was a mess. Containers were smashed. Data screens were cracked. And on the wall, someone had written in Xylene, "Keep bloodlines pure." Who would do this? Han asked. Someone who doesn't like the idea of a Xylene and a human being soulmates, Mido said quietly. Nari felt sick. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was turning into something dangerous. As they surveyed the damage, Director Tai arrived, his face grim. I just received a message from the Science Council, he said. The Conservatives have won the vote. They're sending a ship to bring you back to Xylene, Nari. They're calling it a biological emergency. They can't do that. Nari protested. I'm a scientist, not a prisoner. I've argued against it, but they're insistent. Director Ta looked truly sorry. The ship will be here in 3 days. Hyun stepped forward. What if we find proof that this connection is natural? Would that change their minds? Perhaps, Director Ta said. But what proof could there be? Hyun looked at Nari, his eyes determined. I don't know yet, but we have 3 days to find it. As they left the damaged lab, Nari felt afraid. But looking at Hyun, she also felt something new. The Xylene word for it was Kelari, trust in another person's strength. Humans might call it something else. Maybe even that strange word, love. Whatever it was, for the first time since her mark started glowing, Nari felt certain of one thing. She wasn't facing this alone. We have less than 3 days to find an explanation, Nari said. She paced back and forth in the small meeting room where she, Hyun, Mido, and Dr. Ju had gathered in secret. The Science Council won't listen to theories or maybes, Dr. Ju warned. They need hard evidence. Hyun leaned forward. What if we test more humans? Maybe I'm not the only one who triggers a response in Xylenes. Dr. Ju's antenna perked up with interest. That's a good start. If other humans cause similar reactions, it would prove this isn't just a random error. I can ask my team to volunteer, Hyun offered. And I can find some Xylene volunteers, Mido added. People who haven't found their soulmates yet. Nari nodded. We'll need to be careful. If the Conservatives find out what we're doing, they might try to stop us. Let's use my private lab, Dr. Ju suggested. It's small, but no one will disturb us there. What about old records? Han asked. Has there ever been any case of cross-species matches before? Not that I know of, Dr. Ju said. But the Galactic Archives might have something. Most species don't have soulmate markers like Xylenes, but there could be similar cases. I'll search the archives, Nari decided. Mido, can you help Hyun gather volunteers? And Dr. Ju, please prepare your lab for testing. As they stood to leave, Director Ta entered the room. Everyone froze. Don't look so guilty, Director Ta said with a small smile. I'm here to help. You are? Nari was surprised. Of course. I've known you since you were a student, Nari. I won't let them take you away for some ridiculous correction procedure. His antenna showed his disgust at the idea. What can you do? Han asked. Buy you time. I've filed an official request for a full scientific review before any action is taken. It might delay the retrieval ship by a day or 2. Thank you, Nari said, feeling grateful. Don't thank me yet, Director Ta warned. Find your evidence. I'll hold them off as long as I can. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. In Dr. Ju's lab, they tested all 6 humans from Earth's delegation with 20 unmarked Xylenes. The results were surprising. While none showed the dramatic glow that happened between Nari and Hyun, 3 Xylene showed faint, barely visible responses to different humans. "It's not strong enough to be a soulmate bond," Dr. Ju explained as she examined the readings. "But there's definitely a reaction. The marks are responding to something in human biology." "Is that enough evidence?" Hyun asked. Dr. Ju shook her head. "It's interesting, but not conclusive. The conservatives could argue it's just a mild allergic reaction." Meanwhile, Nari spent hours in the galactic archives, searching through thousands of records of first contact between different species. Most entries were dry and technical, focused on trade agreements and technology exchanges. But then she found something in a very old file. She called everyone to the meeting room again. "Look at this," she said, displaying an ancient text on the screen. "It's a record from over 50,000 years ago. A Xylene exploration ship called the Star Seeker went missing near Sector 82. That's the sector where Earth is located," Hyun said, surprised. "Exactly. The ship had a crew of 30 Xylenes. They were never found, and the mission was written off as lost to a cosmic storm." Mido looked confused. "That's sad, but how does it help us?" "Because," Nari continued, "I cross-referenced with Earth's location. The Star Seeker could have reached Earth's solar system before it disappeared. What if it didn't get destroyed? What if it crashed on Earth?" The room was silent, as everyone considered this possibility. "You think ancient Xylenes might have landed on Earth?" Director Ta finally asked. 50,000 years ago. "It's possible," Nari said. "And if they survived, they might have met early humans." Hyun finished her thought. "Maybe even mixed with them." Dr. Ju's antenna shot straight up, a sign of excitement. That would explain the biological compatibility. If Xylene DNA entered the human gene pool thousands of years ago, it could still be present in some humans today. "Like Commander Hyun," Nari said, looking at him with new understanding. "Is there any way to prove this?" Director Tae asked. "The retrieval ship will be here tomorrow." Dr. Ju thought for a moment. "We would need to do a deep genetic scan of Commander Hyun's DNA, looking specifically for markers that match ancient Xylene genetics." "Can you do that?" Hyun asked. "Yes, but it will take time. And we would need access to the ancient genetic database on Xylene." Director Tae's antenna drooped slightly. "That database is restricted. Only council members can access it." "I might know someone who can help," Mido said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "My cousin works in the Genetic Heritage Department on Xylene. She doesn't agree with the conservatives. She might be willing to send us the data we need." "It's worth trying," Nari said, "but we need to hurry." That night, while Dr. Ju prepared for the genetic scan, and Mido contacted her cousin, Nari and Hyun stood at the viewing window in the station's dome, looking out at the stars. "Do you really think your ancestors might have come to Earth?" Nari asked. "It would explain a lot," Hyun said. "Earth has many legends about visitors from the stars who taught humans new skills. Most scientists dismiss them as myths, but maybe some are based on truth. If we're right, it means humans and Xylenes have been connected for thousands of years without knowing it." Hyun looked at her glowing wrist. "Maybe that's why the mark works between us. It's not recognizing me as alien, but as a distant relative coming home." The idea was beautiful and strange at the same time. Nari felt a wave of emotion she couldn't name. "What will you do if we can't stop the retrieval ship?" Hyun asked softly. Nari had been avoiding this question. "I don't know. On Xylene, they would study me, try to fix my mark. They might never let me return to space." "What if?" Hyun hesitated. "What if you came to Earth instead?" Nari looked at him in surprise. "Leave with you, just like that?" "Why not? Earth has recently joined the galactic community. We need scientists who understand alien biology. You would be welcomed." The idea of leaving everything she knew was frightening, but the thought of never seeing Hyun again, of having her mark corrected to stop responding to him, was worse. Before she could answer, Mido rushed into the dome, her face full of excitement. "We got it. My cousin sent the ancient genetic database. Dr. Ju is ready to begin the scan." The genetic scan took hours. Hyun sat patiently as machines analyzed his DNA, comparing it to the ancient Silene genetic codes. Nari, Mido, and Director Ta waited outside the lab, too nervous to speak. Finally, Dr. Ju emerged, her antenna vibrating with excitement. "You were right," she said. "Commander Hyun's DNA contains markers that match the crew of the Star Seeker. They're faint, diluted by 50,000 years of human genetics, but they're definitely there." "So the ship did crash on Earth," Director Ta said, amazed. "And the crew survived and interbred with humans." "Not just survived," Dr. Ju corrected. "Based on the pattern of genetic markers, it appears at least 20 of the 30 crew members had children with early humans. Their genes spread throughout the human population. That means many humans might carry Silene DNA," Nari realized. "Maybe even all of them to some small degree." "This changes everything," Director Ta said. "Humans aren't just another alien species. They're distant relatives." "Will it be enough to convince the Science Council?" Hyun asked. Director Tae's antenna moved in a pattern showing determination. "I'll make sure it is. This isn't just about one soulmate mark anymore. This is the greatest discovery in Silene history. A lost colony of our people, mixed with humans, developing on their own for 50,000 years." Nari looked at her still glowing wrist, then at Hyun. Her mark hadn't been wrong. It had recognized what they had all missed, a connection that spanned thousands of years and the vast distance between their worlds. For the first time since this all began, Nari felt hope, not just for herself and Hyun, but for both their peoples. The retrieval ship would arrive tomorrow, but now they had a story to tell that even the most conservative council member couldn't ignore. Sometimes the most important scientific discoveries came from the most unexpected places, even from a simple handshake between two people from different worlds. The retrieval ship from Silene arrived exactly on time. Nari watched from the station's main window as the sleek purple vessel docked. Her heart beat fast, making the mark on her wrist pulse with bright blue-green light. "Are you ready?" Hyun asked, standing beside her. He wore his formal Earth uniform today. "I think so," Nari said. She held a data pad containing all their evidence. "Director Ta says the head of the Science Council came personally. That's a good sign. Or it means they think this is very serious," Mido said nervously. "Either way, we have truth on our side," Dr. Ju reminded them. Director Ta approached their small group. "They're coming aboard now. Remember, let me speak first. The head of the council respects protocol." Nari nodded, trying to stay calm. So much depended on the next few minutes. The docking bay doors opened. 5 Tylenes entered the station. 4 wore the gray uniforms of security officers, but the 5th wore the blue robes of the Science Council, decorated with silver symbols showing high rank. "High Counselor Jin," Director Ta said formally, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you for coming personally. This is an honor." Nari was surprised. Counselor Jin was much younger than she expected. Most high-ranking officials were older, with faded antennae and slow movements. But Jin moved with energy and her antennae were bright and alert. "Director Tae," Jin said, returning the bow. "I came because this situation demands careful attention." Her eyes moved to Nari, then to Hyun. "So this is the human who triggered the soulmate mark?" "Yes, High Counselor," Director Ta confirmed. "Commander Hyun of Earth." Hyun stepped forward and bowed, following the Tylene custom he had learned. "It's an honor to meet you, High Counselor." Jin studied him with open curiosity. Then she looked at Nari. "The council has ordered your return to Silene for examination and correction. However, Director Taz says you have discovered evidence that explains this unusual situation. We have, High Counselor, Neri said, trying to keep her voice steady. With your permission, we would like to present our findings. Jin considered for a moment, then nodded. Very well. Let us go somewhere more comfortable for your presentation. In the station's largest conference room, Nari, Hyun, Dr. Ju, and Director Tai presented their evidence to Counselor Jin. They showed the test results from other humans and Tyleans. They explained the discovery of the lost ship Star Seeker and its possible crash on Earth. Finally, they displayed the genetic scans showing ancient Xylene markers in Hyun's DNA. As you can see, High Counselor, Dr. Ju concluded, the evidence strongly suggests that humans and Tyleans share a biological connection dating back 50,000 years. The Soulmate mark isn't malfunctioning. It's recognizing compatible genetic material. Jin was silent for a long moment, studying the data on the screen. Her antenna moved in patterns showing deep thought. This is remarkable, she finally said. If true, it changes our understanding of Xylene history. We believe it is true, Director Ta said. All the evidence supports it. Perhaps, Jin said carefully. But some on the council will question these findings. They will say the data is manipulated or misinterpreted. Test it yourself, Hyun suggested. Bring more humans to Xylene. Study their genetics. You'll find the same markers. Jin looked at him with new interest. You would volunteer for more testing? I would, Hyun said firmly. And I believe many humans would as well. We're curious about our origins. If some of our ancestors were Xylene, we want to know that history. Jin turned to Nari. And you? What do you want from all this? Nari took a deep breath. This was the moment to speak her truth. I want to follow the science wherever it leads. I want to study this connection between our species. And she hesitated, then continued, I want the freedom to explore what my mark is telling me, without being corrected for something that isn't wrong. Jin's antenna showed surprise at Nari's boldness. Then she did something unexpected. She pushed up her sleeve, revealing her own wrist. There was a mark there, but it was dull and gray. Mine never glowed, Jin said quietly. I waited and waited, but I never found my match. The conservatives said it was better that way. I could focus on science and leadership without distractions. But I always wondered what it would be like. Her antenna shifted to a more formal position. I need to examine this evidence more carefully before making a decision. Nari, you will remain on the station until tomorrow. Then I will tell you the council's decision. That night, Nari couldn't sleep. She paced in her quarters, wondering what would happen tomorrow. Would Counselor Jin believe them? Or would she side with the conservatives? Her door chimed, indicating a visitor. When she opened it, Hyun stood there. I couldn't sleep, he said. Too much thinking. Me too, Nari admitted, letting him in. I keep wondering, Hyun said, sitting down, what if the council doesn't accept our evidence? Then I'll have to go back to Xylene, Nari said simply. I meant what I said before, Hyun told her. You could come to Earth instead. My government would protect you. Nari looked at her glowing wrist. You would do that for me, even though we barely know each other. I know enough, Hyun said. I know you're brilliant and brave. I know you stood up for the truth when it would have been easier to give in. And I know that whatever this mark means, I want to find out. He smiled. Humans are curious that way. Before Nari could answer, her communication device buzzed. It was a message from Director Ta. Jin wants to see you both. Now. They found Counselor Jin in the station's dome, looking out at the stars. She turned when they entered. I couldn't wait until morning, she said. I've been thinking about your evidence all night. Nari and Hyun exchanged worried glances. The conservative faction wants me to bring you back, Nari, Jin continued. They say your mark is defective and must be fixed. Nari felt her hopes sink, but then Jin smiled. I disagree, she said simply. The evidence is clear. Humans carry ancient Tylene DNA. Your mark is working perfectly. It's our understanding that was limited. So I don't have to go back? Nari asked, hardly believing it. No, Jin confirmed. In fact, I'm authorizing a new research project. Human Tylene genetic history. You will lead it, Nari, with Commander Hyun as Earth's representative. That's wonderful, Nari exclaimed, her antenna quivering with joy. But what about the conservatives? Hyun asked. Won't they fight this? Jin's antenna moved in a pattern showing confidence. Let them try. Science must follow evidence, not fear or tradition. Besides, she added with a smile, I've already sent the data to all major science centers on Tylene. The discovery is too important to suppress. What does this mean for other humans and Tylenes? Nari asked. We'll need to study that carefully, Jin said. More testing, more research. But I think we're at the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples. She looked thoughtfully at Nari's glowing wrist. Perhaps the mark doesn't show us who we must be with. Perhaps it only shows us possibilities, connections we might explore if we choose to. Choice, Hyun said, smiling at Nari. That sounds very human. Maybe humans and Tylenes have more in common than we realized, Jin said. Now, I should contact the council with my decision. They won't all be happy, but that's the nature of progress. After Jin left, Nari and Hyun stood together by the window. The stars seemed brighter somehow. So, Hyun said, co-leaders of a major research project. That means we'll be working together for a long time. Is that okay? Nari asked. Your mark isn't telling you who to be with. You can choose freely. Hyun gently took her hand. The mark on her wrist glowed even brighter at his touch. I choose to see where this goes, he said, one day at a time. That's how humans do it. Nari smiled. I think I like the human way. 6 months later, the first Joint Evolutionary Research Center opened on the station. Scientists from Earth and Tylene worked together, studying the ancient connection between their peoples. Dozens of humans were found to have varying levels of Tylene DNA. Some Tylenes even traveled to Earth to learn about the planet where their ancestors might have lived. And throughout the galaxy, the story spread of the alien girl whose soulmate mark glowed for a human, a simple biological response that changed 2 worlds forever. On the opening day of the center, Nari stood beside Hyun as reporters from many worlds took pictures and asked questions. One asked how it felt to be at the center of such a historic discovery. Nari looked at Hyun, then at her wrist, still glowing after all these months. Sometimes the best discoveries happen when you least expect them, she said. Sometimes all it takes is reaching out and touching someone new. Hyun smiled and finished her thought. And being brave enough to follow where that touch leads.